In this lesson, we're going to be going over using the scene window and the game window. Now, currently we're looking at the scene window, and this is going to be used to actually build our game. Now, this is going to be used to build 2D games, 3D games, or even apps. Now, let's take a look at some of the tools we can use to start building our games. At the very top, we have a hand tool. If you left-click that, you can navigate around by going left and right, up or down. So I'm pressing left-click and holding, and then dragging in the direction I want to move in. Next, we have our translate tool, and this is going to help us to move our game objects around. Now, I need to select a game object. I'll select my sphere here. And notice that if I left click on it, we get this icon that appears, but we also get an orange outline around our 3D object. You won't see this outline on the camera or the light, but you will see it on our sphere. Now, these arrows that you see here are referencing different types of axis values. So we have the y-axis, x-axis, and z-axis. Now, up at the very top here, this is a global coordinate system for our scene view. So right now we're using the global coordinates. So the y-axis matches what we have up here. And if I want to move this along a specific axis, all I have to do is left-click and drag on the arrows. If I want to move this in all directions, left-click and drag on the center here, and you can move it wherever you want. Now note that as we're moving this around, the values over here are going to be reflected in our transform component. So if you want to get more precise, maybe you just want to move 1 along the x-axis, just type in 1 along the x-axis, and there you go. I can also zero out the y and the z-axis, and I can also reset the entire transform component by left-clicking on the gear icon and going down to reset. Now, as mentioned before, we are using a global coordinate system, and if you want to utilize a local coordinate system for the sphere, all you have to do is left-click up here. Now, currently we're in the local coordinate system, so if I rotate this object and go back to my translate tool, you'll see that it now reflects the rotation of that sphere. But if I left-click on that button to go into the global coordinate system, that global coordinate system matches what we have up here as well. So regardless of the orientation of our sphere, it's always going to match this if we're using global. Now, once again, I'll reset this. Now let's take a look at the next tool, which is our rotate tool. So if I left-click on the next tool, this is going to be our rotate tool. Now, to rotate an object, all you have to do is left-click and drag on any one of these lines. So if I want to rotate along the z-axis, I'll just left-click and drag on the blue line here. Go back to my translate tool, and you can see we've rotated it. Once again, you can type in your own values to be more precise, so I can go with 90 degrees along the z-axis. So that is the rotate tool. Next, we have our scale tool. So for our scale tool, if you want to scale along a specific axis, just pull on the cubes here. Or if you want to scale uniformly, just left-click and drag in the center. Now, the last tool is really not going to be used for 3D objects. You could use it for 3D objects, but you'll typically use this for UI elements. So this is our rect tool. So if I left-click on this, this allows us to adjust things in our UI, such as the scale or rotation. So if I hover over the corner here, you'll get this little icon that appears that lets us know that we can rotate. So if I left-click and drag, you can see I can rotate this. I can also left-click and drag along the lines here to scale along that specific orientation. As you can see, this does work, but if we take a look around, you can see that it's not really meant for 3D objects. This is used for UI elements like images, text, or anything of that sort. Alright, so those are the basic tools. Let's take a look at how we can navigate around within our scene view. Now, we're not going to be going over everything in regards to navigation. I am going to be going over some of the most common navigational tools that I'm going to be using, some of the shortcuts I use when navigating around within the scene window. Now, we've already covered the hand tool, but if you want to pull it up using a specific shortcut, all you have to do is press down on your middle mouse button, hold it down, and then move left and right. When you release, it's going to go back to the translate tool or whatever tool you were using before. So I use that quite often to just pan around left and right, up or down. Now, if you want to rotate around an object, hold down Alt. You'll get this little icon that appears. Left click and drag around to rotate around an object. Now, if you want to zoom in and out, just use your scroll wheel. And if you want to look around, you can also hold down right click, just look around like this. Now, as you're holding down right click, you also see a stack of lines right underneath the eye icon. Now, this allows us to actually move around in a first person view or a fly through view. So if I hold down W while holding down right click, I can then fly around. So you can use the WASD keys to kind of move around a little bit more precisely. You can also press Q and E to move up and down. And then as you're moving, if you want to move faster, hold down Shift. Now lastly, I'll talk about one of the shortcuts that I like to use quite often when working in the scene view, which is to locate specific game objects. So right now, I'm in a view where I can't actually see anything within my scene. Well, if I'm trying to locate my sphere, all I have to do is left click on it, then with my arrow in the scene view, press F, and it'll focus in on that game object. Alright, so that is the scene view. Let's take a look at the game window now. So right next to our scene view, typically you'll find the game window. Left click on it. Now we're not going to navigate around within our game window. The game window is going to be used for testing your game or playing your game. So at the very top we have these three buttons. We have play, pause, and step through. Now right now if we hit play, you can see nothing really happens. And that's because we don't have anything moving around. So let's go back into our scene view. I'm going to left click on the sphere. I'm going to add a rigid body to this. Let's go to add component. Look for a rigid body by typing in rigid body. Left click to add it on. And we're going to go with the default values on the rigid body components. Now let's also add in a floor. Jump back to our scene view. Let's go to game object, 3D object, and then plane. I'll move this down. And I'll move the sphere up a bit. So now when we play our game, the sphere is going to fall to the ground using physics because of the rigid body and the sphere collider. Let's jump back to our game view. So there's our sphere and here is our floor. Now when I hit play, you should see this working. Alright, great. Now let's go through this once again, but this time we'll click maximize on play. What that's going to do is it's going to maximize our window when we hit play. Now when I click play again, it's going to go back to its original size. Now there are a few other options within the game window. Let's go over some of the most common ones, which is the aspect ratio. So right now we're using free aspect. I'm going to left click on this, and I can change this to say 4:3, 16:9. I can also specify a specific resolution, like 1920 by 1080. Now if I hit play, it's going to play in that aspect ratio. Let's take a look at the other buttons in here. So we have a pause and we have a step through. So right after I hit play, I'm going to click on pause. So there we go. It paused our game. Now typically I would pause the game to actually take a look at something a little bit more closely, or maybe I want to jump into the scene view, maybe adjust something in there. So maybe I want to start this up a little bit higher. Again, pull on the y-axis here, move that sphere up. If we go back to our game view, you can see that the sphere is off screen now. If I press pause again, now it's going to start off from that new position. Now lastly, we have our step through. So we're going to press play, then pause, and we'll take a look at the step through. Now the step through allows us to step through one frame at a time. So if you want to test something and you're not sure when something happens, this is going to be a great tool to use. So I'm going to press it once, and you can see it starts going down one frame at a time. There we go. So that is the game window. That is the scene window. In our next lesson, we're going to be going over using packages.